Hi everybody, Peter Turner here from ConnexionCFO. Today I'm joined with Kevin. Going to be a slight reversal today. Normally I'm interviewing somebody, but I've asked that somebody could interview me. Kevin is, I've known Kevin for a number of years. He is a partner within Wave Partners. So Kevin, if you just want to give a bit of an introduction about yourself, and then we can talk about some of my thoughts and views on the CFO.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, well, this is a subject very close to my heart, having been a CFO for many years in both public and private companies. I've transitioned away from that to being an entrepreneur and an advisor. So here at Wave Partners, we advise high growth businesses on principally M&A exits. So acutely aware of the expertise that you need around the table in order to achieve a really great outcome, and crucial to that role is the CFO. I'm slightly biased, having been one previously. So really interested in the way that the market is, developing, and how you see that, Peter, in the value that a fractional CFO can bring to the table over perhaps an incumbent that's running the day-to-day business.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin.
So on that, I mean, Peter, you've worn a number of hats over the years. The entrepreneur hat, the running the business. But I particularly wanted to drop into the times where you've run two successful technology businesses. One that you grew to a very successful exit, and the other that is still relatively young and still growing. And how do you view that role between the CFO and you as the CEO entrepreneur, particularly a CEO that's sort of financially literate as yourself?
Great question. I think the interesting part for me, having been both a CEO and CFO, is I really had to divest myself from that CFO mentality, because they are two different roles, and I think the role of the CEO fundamentally is about understanding the why. Why are you doing this? So for me, my why is crystal clear. I want to help highly ambitious founders, highly ambitious CEOs achieve, climb the Mount Everest, whatever that is. It might be a business that wants to grow from 10 million to 30 million or 100 million, whatever it is. That's what I want to achieve. That's my why. And then the other part of it is the what. What is pretty much is what are the products or services that I've got to enable us to help clients achieve that. And then so I had to divest myself between that role of the CEO and the CFO to make sure that I stay focused on that. And then the other part is, how do I build out that C-suite team so that we can achieve our ambitions when I was that technology entrepreneur. And that included the CFO and the CMO. I always, and part of the what for me, I'm always crystal clear on the what, and I think every CFO should understand the what. And the what for me is, that you need to be able to have knowledge around what's the market, what's my target market, what's my potential target market, what's the product, and what's the product innovation, what's the product pipeline, what's the product timeline. If we're going to move into other markets, do we need to develop other products, or do we acquire, for example? They also need to be very strong around understanding the routes to market, because within that routes to market, there's conversations around pricing, cost of acquisition. And then the other two parts are, understanding the other people that should be within that C-suite team. And then the final piece is understanding systems, because, if your business is growing at 20 or 30 or 50, 60, or 50 or 60% per annum, you have to understand systems, which enables you to scale your business as you grow. So that's the why, and that's the what. I had this phrase that I talk to people a lot. I call it stepping forward, and being an entrepreneur can be tough.
You mentioned that before. What do you mean? What do you mean by sort of stepping forward?
Well, stepping forward is being an entrepreneur can be tough. You have good days and you have bad days, and most of the time you do the same thing every day. And so I saw a business yesterday that are in quite they're distressed, and the founders were wanting to step back. They're not quite sure what to do, and I actually said to them, that's the worst thing to do. What you need to do is you need to step forward. Everybody in your business is looking for you for leadership. Everybody is looking for you to be that strength. Even though the walls might be crumbling down around you, you've got to step forward. And that's one of the things I learned in the first business. We have bad days. And even when things are going good, you're climbing your Mount Everest and your guide's helping you and it's 100 yards away. There are times when things are going good that you've got to innovate, you've got to drive. Maybe you want to think about new markets. You just can't stand still. So I always talk about in terms of stepping. Always as a CEO, you need to be stepping forward all the time. And I think the CFO needs to be able to be highly supportive in that role. I think a good CFO is thinking about the future, not necessarily the past. The past might give you some ideas of where things went right, where things went wrong, but actually it's all about the future.
Yeah, I concur with that completely. I mean, you can't change the past, but it's criminal not to learn the lessons from the past, in order to shape your future.
Look, I read the other day on LinkedIn, Warren Buffett, one of the biggest traits he ever looked for in somebody, or the biggest trait of the most successful entrepreneurs, and he simplified it down. It's perseverance. Because you do the same things every day. And I wake up every day knowing it's going to be a hard day, but I love what I do, and you've just got to have that perseverance.
Well, so on that note, I mean, I think you've got an unfair advantage because you've placed probably 500, 700, CFOs into businesses over the years. So yeah, you've got an unfair advantage as to what good looks like. But even you don't get it right all the time. I know that in your first business, you got through a couple of CFOs sort of, reasonably quickly. Why was that? And, what did you learn from that? And, what might you have done differently with the benefit of hindsight, if anything?
It's interesting. Having been placing CFOs all the time, at the time, I kind of felt as though all CFOs were the same, and the CFOs that I placed originally and moved on pretty quickly were good. But the fundamental thing that I came unstuck on is they weren't really engaged in my why. They weren't really engaged in when things got bad or I had bad days, they weren't really engaged in that piece. And the key learning I had is they need to understand your why, and they need to understand what I call the what, which is ultimately your strategy. And that's, understand the market, understand the product, understand your routes to market, understand the people and the systems in place. And as a result of that, what's the strategy? And as a result of that, what's the financial business model that we can take forward? And we can present to investors. And I remember having a conversation with one of the VC firms recently, and they said, we no longer want to use fractional CFOs. Why is that? I mean, because we find that after 6 months, and once they've got all the low-hanging fruit, they start to disengage. And to some extent, that's what I noticed. It's the engagement wasn't there. Whereas people like yourself, you understand that market, you get excited by that, you understand the product and the product innovation and the market opportunity, product innovations, you understand the routes to market. Really excited about other people that are involved in the business and the systems, and as a result, your engagement happens really quickly, and it's because you can see that engagement for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. But I kind of felt as that those people that, even though they were good CFOs, I just didn't get that engagement. I didn't get that. Are these people thinking forward? Are they sitting down and having conversations with me around those particular elements? Really.
Yeah. So, and I think I've had similar experience. So for me, the difference between a sort of good and a really great CFO is the number should tell the same story that the CEO is telling. The number of times I've heard the CEO, he's super passionate, he's got vision, he's talking about his business, and then you see the numbers and it's like, the numbers aren't talking to you, they're not telling the same story, and they might be very, very accurate, very precise, lots of information, but are they painting the same picture that the CEO is talking about? And that can be achieved through how those numbers are presented, the key metrics that you're pulling out, the key underlying drivers, making them relevant to all of the things that you talked about, the different product, market segmentation, pricing, etc. And so how those numbers are presented, both historically and going forward, makes a huge difference to how that business is perceived, whether or not it's an M&A transaction or talking to your investors or, any external event or even your own management team.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time I interview potentially new CFOs now, I always ask them, what are the 3 most important traits you've got that you think add value from a CFO's perspective? And what I realized that the 3 most important traits are they understand the people, they understand the strategy, and then the final one, which I like the most, is they understand how to talk the narrative, how to build the story. Because at the end of the day, if you're pitching to the VC, the VCs, they want the story first. And if you can't tell the story, you're really in trouble. Or if you're talking to your staff, the staff want to hear the story. The numbers, no matter what the numbers are, it's the story that they really want to listen, which is just what you've said. It's the story that, and so top class CFOs can, they can tell the story.
So that's interesting. So is that, I know, we've spoken before, and you've got a preference for CFOs with, a PE or preferably multiple PE background. Why is that? Is that linked to the storytelling, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, it is. It's linked to the storytelling. It's linked to they understand commercials, and they understand pressure, and they understand how to communicate to external parties or to the board. They understand that not all things aren't always going to be good, or they understand if somebody's growing at 20%, maybe they're going to understand how do you grow at 40%. Maybe there are some limitations in the business that they can take away. And I think you learn that having worked inside PE houses, because there's always that drive for getting a return. There's always that pressure. So your commercial skills generally are considerably greater than those people who have not worked inside an invested business. And even with the VCs may tend to be a little bit more standoffish, whereas the PE houses they're sitting on that board, they've got demands, they've got expectations. So that tends to be why I work with CFOs who have come from a PE background. And ultimately, you've done more transactional work, you've done more fundraisers, you've worked in bigger businesses, you've worked in businesses that have scaled at maybe 100 or 200%. You've worked in global businesses. So you've worked in environments where it's been a lot more complicated, and you can understand that complication. I think we were having a conversation a few weeks back about a business that you saw, and they had an extremely complicated cap table. Extremely complicated cap table. And I think if nobody's been involved in a PE background, it's going to be very hard for them to negotiate how you restructure that cap table. I haven't had experience in PE businesses, so and when you talked about the issue, I thought I don't think I could do that, and I've been a CFO, but I know I couldn't do that. So, and that's why I think because there are opportunities and issues all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly relevant, when it comes to, what for many entrepreneurs, founders, many investors is it's the money moment. It's when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. This is my bread and butter now, sort of running M&A transactions. And I often come up against the reluctance of teams to bring in, any external expertise, or for them to have their existing team run that transaction. And I've got my views, which I can share in a moment, as to the advantages of bringing in some external expertise. But I'm interested in your perspective on what the pros and the cons of bringing in that sort of fractional CFO and or other expertise around the table to help facilitate that transaction.
I think first and foremost, if you have a CFO in place already, you need to have an open and honest conversation with that CFO around what the expertise is in doing transactional work. Now, if they've done one, their expertise compared to somebody like yourself who you've done 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100 transactions, your expertise compared to somebody who's done one or done none is considerably different. Often I've seen businesses that have said, right, the CFO wants to get somebody in to do the day-to-day operational piece while they go and do the M&A. And often it's because they want to learn about it in M&A. And you have to, as a CEO, you have to realize doing an M&A transaction can get very complicated. It's just not doing a deal. There's the build up to the deal. There's the finalizing the deal, there's the integration piece, etc. And there are some times when you got to sit across the table and look at each other and negotiate certain things. And if you haven't done that before, you might think that you might be making the business money by doing the acquisition, but you could be losing a lot of money as well. So I actually think the incumbent CFO should continue to do the day-to-day stuff, and if they haven't done transactional, if they don't have transactional experience, and actually should outsource that to somebody like yourself and Wave Partners, because you've got that innate expertise and you're going to bring commercial value, you're going to bring value and value around integration, etc., into that whole piece. And ultimately, you're probably going to get a better deal than somebody who hasn't done that type of work before.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's aligned very much with sort of the way that I view things. I think, the advantage of bringing in, an external party in whatever capacity, and there's a number of ways to sort of skin that cat, is that level of, objectivity. What does the business really look like? Where are the value drivers? Where are the value destroyers? Often businesses that have been through the sort of VC and the PE backed route, they're very good at pitching, but they're pitching about us. Give us your money, we're brilliant, this is what we're going to do with it. And when you're in an M&A transaction, the guy on the other side of the table, he doesn't care about how brilliant you are, he cares about how brilliant he is and the problem that he's going to solve. So it's, what do you do for me, and where are the value enhancers here? What am I going to pay a premium for? And what am I worried about? Or what have you got that I don't value? And therefore, what's going to be discounted? And it's very, very difficult for sort of an incumbent team that's there in the day-to-day, in the weeds, to stand back from that and be truly objective about what that is and how that aligns with, their personal objectives behind a transaction. So, I fully support getting in that financial expertise, be that a fractional CFO, be that expertise like ourselves at Wave Partners, or indeed other expertise around the board table.
Yeah, I mean, I met so many businesses where they've said that we tried to do an acquisition. It lasted 12 months or 16 months or whatever, but it was such a major distraction. Our revenues went backwards. We didn't get any, our business went backwards, and ultimately in the transaction never went ahead.
There's two massive destroyers of transactions. One is a lack of momentum because the business isn't prepared, so it doesn't have the information, and that's a huge burden on the management team and normally the CFO in particular. So you've got to have that incumbent financial skill set fully utilized to get yourself through that process. And then the other one, of course, is missing your numbers during a transaction, which at worst can kill the deal, at best normally leads to a renegotiation that that doesn't normally end well.
Yeah, the other side of M&A activity is where a business is looking, they haven't considered doing any M&A transactions, but maybe it's worthwhile having a chat, because there is always other opportunity. Let's say you want to go into a new market, maybe rather than investing in that new market yourself directly, maybe there's an opportunity to do an acquisition. Or maybe you have a really good big client base, and instead of product innovating yourself, maybe there's the opportunity to do an acquisition. And I think sometimes incumbent CFOs, if they haven't had that experience, they don't understand the why. So typically what they might say to somebody is, you're not ready for an acquisition at this stage. Whereas the key thing is to really understand the why, then look at the commercials. And someone like yourself, you can do that part very quickly for organizations.
What's some of the reasons that people give you for not wanting a fractional CFO, and what would you say to them? I mean, one of the pushback that I've received is, well, they just don't understand my business well enough. If they're not in it full time, how can they understand the numbers? How do you respond to people with that, which is a very valid point?
It's a valid point, but if I look at your skill sets and you know, I know you've been a CFO and you concentrate more on the transactional work now, I would have you in my business tomorrow over anybody else, but I don't need you full time. I want the top 3 inches of your head that's got all the skills and all the expertise. That's what I want. I'd rather put money into a financial controller full time, who's going to do the systems and the processes and the dashboards and the reporting structures. And I'd rather that over a period of time, you help coach and mentor them to become a finance director, and then maybe a CFO at a later stage. But if I brought you on board full time, you know, give me your skill sets, you're probably going to then want me to recruit a financial controller, so that, you know, it costs me even more money. But the reality is, I only just need I need the real skills and the expertise and the commercial skills that you bring. I don't need you to be doing the day-to-day operational stuff. It's far better people to do that than you would.
So, at what point do you think then that, you know, businesses, you know, as they go through the ups and downs through their growth story, and you know the various stages and product growth, market growth, etc., different investor rounds. At what point do you think businesses, or at what stage, transition from a fractional CFO to a full-time CFO need?
So I think it's similar to the last question in that I would probably, before I'm recruiting a full-time CFO, I would make sure that I've maxed out on the time and capability of a financial controller, and maybe then even a finance director. But you know, I'd focus more on the financial controller, because there's no reason. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't be involved. And I think you're involved with a business that turns over 80 million, quite a complicated business, and there's no reason why a business can't turn over, or is turning over 80 million and still uses a fractional CFO. But obviously it depends on the level of complications. If it was a manufacturing environment, probably a bit less so, it'd be a smaller business. But maybe technology companies, I think they could be turning over 80 million, 100 million. You know, we've got clients that turn over 80 million or 100 million and use a fractional CFO. But then you just need to make sure you understand what that finance team looks like that can support that fractional CFO. Additionally, AI is going to automate a number of tasks, and I think the top level skills of the CFO become even more important in terms of how they add value into a business.
So one question I've got is, you know, it used to be, or certainly it used to, going back a number of years, that sort of fractional CFOs were viewed as people that, you know, they'd retired, they were just keeping their hand in, and it was not a proper career anymore. You know, my sense is that has really changed, and that senior finance people, you know, are pursuing a number of different roles in a portfolio career in order that they just focus on that top 3%. But is that in your experience, is that a perception that is still out there held by people, or is that changing?
What I'm noticing is that you're getting younger people coming into the market from providing fractional services, and the reality is they've probably done more transactional work than a large number of people who are in, say, mid-50s plus. And you know, I know a CFO. He's 40 now. He spent 7 years in San Francisco, and working for PE houses. He's done 7 transactions. And he's probably got more skills and expertise, and it's a tech focus, has more skills and expertise than a number of CFOs in their 50s and 60s. And so I'm not being ageist there. It's just, I think it's about the skill set and the relevancy of those skill sets to whatever the business is. But they treat it as a professional career for the younger people. Some of the older people might say to themselves, you know, this is a little bit of extra money. I'm going to increase the number of days I play golf, etc. And I'm not saying that's the bad thing, and for some businesses that might be okay. But for those ambitious founders, ambitious CEOs, you know, they're very much looking for those people. It comes back to that business I had, and I brought on board those 2 CFOs, and both of them left because they just didn't have that mindset, that engagement, that desire to truly understand my business and where it wanted to go. So there's definitely a push towards people making this a career. Definitely a greater push towards a career focus with fractional CFOs.
So if I'm listening to this, as I'm sure there are many hundreds of thousands of people listening to this, and I'm thinking about the shape of my finance function and whether or not a fractional CFO is right for me, a full-time CFO. At what point should I think about giving you a call, Peter? Is it when a transaction is around the corner, in advance of that, when the business is just going along BAU? At what point do you recommend that people sort of pick the phone up and get in touch?
So I think that's at any stage really, because you could be a business turning over 5 million, you're ticking along, but the reality is there may be some market opportunities there that mean you could grow to 10 million. I always ask people, how do you go from 5 million to 20 million in 12 months? And the reason why I ask that is you think differently. You might want to grow from 5 million to 5.5, 5.5 to 6, but you're never changing your business. And the reality with AI, the industries are going to change. They're going to change at pace. So I think you always, as a CEO or founder, you always need to be thinking, how do I go from 5 to 30 million? Because it forces you to think differently. I'm not saying that you actually do all the changes, but you should be having those moments. And the level of the CFOs that we've got here in ConnexionCFO, they're all the ones that are going to help you think differently. And some of those actions you'll take on board, and maybe some of them you won't. So the summary is, at any stage, it's like I saw a business yesterday that turns over 1 million, and the founder is probably one of the most passionate entrepreneurial people I've met, but he spends 10% of his time in that space, and the rest of the time he spends at operational. And the reality is, if we can get him into 100% time in that space, that business will absolutely boom. So our whole conversations with him over the last 3 to 4 weeks about how do we get him into that space more. So we bring in a CFO on a fractional basis to take control of all, or manage all the rest of the business, while he just spends his time in that, out in the marketplace, because that's where it will succeed.
Excellent. Well, I don't think there is any other sort of burning questions I've got on my side. Is there anything else that you think that we haven't covered that might be relevant for the audience?
I think that just as a summary, I think if you have a CFO, you should always look at, I think you should always be considering your why and your what, and do they understand the market, the product, the routes to market, the team and systems. And if they don't, then maybe you should reconsider the options. It might even be some coaching and mentoring. If you don't have a CFO, I think you should probably make the inquiries about whether it's myself or somebody else or another organization or independence. You should probably make some inquiries to see if they can add value. Because, I think CFOs are pretty much ultimately second in command in a business, and they should be able to help you drive that business forward.
Good summary. Well, as always, Peter, a pleasure talking with you. For anyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. I guess any questions come back to Peter or myself. But on that, I wish everyone a very good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers.